Imagine for a second that you could magically split yourself into two distinct people, right? And like you put them side by side in a room.
Okay, weird visual, but I'm with you.
Right. So version A of you is the person you describe in your 150 character social media bio.
Ah, the highlight reel.
Exactly. This is the person made entirely of your stated morals, your overarching philosophy, the inspirational quotes you share, the political or social stances you fiercely debate in the comment sections, all that.
Right. The person you want the world to see.
Yeah. But then right next to them is version B, and version B has no words. Version B is just a raw, unedited data feed of what you actually do when, like, your Wi-Fi drops during an important call, or when you're exhausted in gridlock traffic. Basically what you do when absolutely no one is watching.
Oh, wow. That's a deeply uncomfortable mental image, honestly.
Right, because if you had to stand in that room and look at them both, you have to ask yourself, how massive is the gap between those two people?
I mean, we all know there's a gap, like it's unavoidable. We live in this era of what you might call high-definition identity.
Oh, I like that term, high-definition identity.
Yeah, because we have this unprecedented array of tools to broadcast a highly curated, ultra-crisp image of our virtues. But that tension, the tension between version A's broadcast and version B's reality, that is exactly where our actual credibility lives or dies.
And exploring that exact tension is our mission for today's deep dive. We're taking a magnifying glass to a profoundly grounding truth that just cuts right through the noise of our public declarations.
It really does.
Because the core premise here is almost brutally simple, which is what you say you believe is basically irrelevant compared to how you actually operate.
Absolutely.
We're pulling this from an incredibly thought-provoking post. This was dated April 26, 2026, published on the blog Knowledge is King. It's written by an analyst named Mark Wells, and it's titled The Living Creed, Why Your Character is Your Real Religion.
Right. And right out of the gate, we should probably clarify the stakes here, for you listening. While the word religion is front and center in that title, this is not a theological discussion.
Yeah.
Wells is using the term to describe our foundational operating system. Like, this is a profound psychological examination of human credibility and really the mechanics of our own hypocrisy.
That's heavy stuff.
It is. It challenges us to look at the architectural structure of who we claim to be versus who we actually are.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the architectural metaphor is exactly where Wells starts.
Yeah.
And it fundamentally changes how we usually process the concept of having beliefs.
Right.
He introduces this framing of the blueprint versus the building. In this model, everything that version A does, the stated beliefs, the bio, the creeds we recite, that is just the blueprint. It's literally a drawing.
Yeah.
And as Wells puts it so sharply, he says you cannot stay dry under a drawing of a roof.
Man, what's fascinating here is how easily we confuse the two. Like, blueprints are inherently satisfying, right? They're mathematically precise, aesthetically pleasing. They represent this perfect, unblemished ideal.
Yeah, they're clean. No messy reality.
Exactly. When we articulate our beliefs, we get a little dopamine hit. We feel a sense of accomplishment just for having drawn the plans. But religion, philosophy, ethics, those are just the blueprints. Character is the actual house.
Right.
You simply cannot claim to be living inside a magnificent cathedral if you are physically standing in the absolute ruins of your own daily conduct.
But hold it, I want to challenge this framing for a second.
Yeah.
Because isn't a blueprint a completely necessary first step?
Right.
I mean, we literally cannot build the house of our character without having an aspirational drawing first, right?
Sure, yeah. You need a plan.
Right. We need to know what we're aiming for. So why does this framework treat the blueprint as if it's almost a lie rather than just, step one of a construction process?
That is a very fair pushback. The blueprint itself isn't a lie. The deception happens when we hold up a piece of paper and demand that the world treat us as if we have already built the mansion.
Oh, I see. Wow.
Yeah. The psychological trap is substituting the intention for the execution. True belief isn't an intellectual exercise where you just memorize the floor plan. It is the internal operating system running quietly in the background of every single physical action you take.
So it's about the follow-through.
Exactly. The blueprint is necessary, yes, but if your character doesn't eventually match the design becomes an instrument of deception. It basically becomes a costume.
Think about your own workplace or industry right now. Like, you've probably interacted with a company, maybe a trendy new startup that has a perfectly curated vision board.
Oh, we've all seen those.
Right. You walk into the lobby and the walls are literally painted with their core values.
Mhm.
Words like synergy, collaboration, wellness, transparency.
The classic buzzwords.
Yes, that is their corporate blueprint. But then you walk onto the actual sales floor, and the culture is built entirely on malice, backstabbing, massive ego, and burnout.
Yeah, a total nightmare.
If the actual physical building is constructed out of malice, then the shiny blueprint in the lobby isn't just an aspiration anymore. It's active manipulation.
Precisely. And this translates directly to our individual lives. Your character is the undeniable physical evidence of what you actually worship.
Yeah.
It is the building materials you choose to pick up every day, regardless of what the schematic in your pocket says.
Which brings us to the inevitable friction. Right?
Mhm.
What happens when we bump into someone whose blueprint completely contradicts their building?
It's jarring.
It really is. Wells describes this jarring dissonance we experience when dealing with people who speak the language of virtue while practicing the art of vice. He calls this specific phenomenon an echo without a voice.
An echo without a voice. It's a haunting phrase, really, because it implies a total lack of substance. There's no physical body generating the sound. It's just hollow noise bouncing off the wall.
Just noise.
And cognitively speaking, we all have a deeply ingrained radar for this kind of incongruence. When someone's actions betray their words, our brains process it not just as confusing, but as a potential threat. Like, we find it deeply unsettling.
We see this play out in the most mundane, relatable ways, too. Like, someone might constantly preach peace, mindfulness, stoicism online.
Oh, yeah, they have the meditation apps.
They share the profound quotes, exactly. But the second their cognitive load spikes, say, they hit unexpected gridlock traffic when they're already late, or a colleague sends a mildly passive-aggressive email, they completely lose their mind.
Yep.
They lash out, they scream at the dashboard, they become entirely consumed by rage.
And if we look at the mechanics of why that happens, it actually makes perfect sense. Our blueprint beliefs are generally driven by our prefrontal cortex. They're logical, they're aspirational, and they require active mental energy to maintain. But in a high-stress moment like gridlock traffic, that cognitive load becomes too heavy.
So the system crashes.
Exactly. The brain gets exhausted and drops the facade, defaulting to its base operating system. And that's the basal ganglia, where our deeply ingrained habits live.
Wow.
Yeah. So if your baseline habit is impatience and anger, that is exactly what comes out when the stress hits. The blueprint requires energy. The building is what is left when you're exhausted.
So when that facade drops, the impact on their credibility is catastrophic. Wells comes to a rather harsh but honestly completely fair conclusion about this.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back.
Not at all. He says that when your tongue out paces your heart like that, your credibility doesn't just take a temporary dip, it evaporates.
Just gone.
Because you aren't merely misrepresenting your belief system in that moment of road rage, you are actively disproving it. If that supposed internal peace is completely inaccessible to you the moment you're slightly inconvenienced, then that peace was never truly yours to begin with. It was just a pretty line drawn on your blueprint.
Exactly. True alignment requires no megaphone. It only requires a consistent hand. If you have to constantly tell people you are honest, peaceful, or kind, it is usually because your actions aren't doing the talking for you.
So, if our public declarations and our carefully crafted bios are essentially meaningless metrics for who we actually are, what is the real metric? Like, how do we as individuals run an honest, unflinching audit on ourselves without relying on the stories we like to tell ourselves?
Well, the audit happens by tracking our habits. A person's creed might be written in ink, but their heart is written in their habits.
Ink versus habits.
Yeah, and when the ink and the habits disagree, you must entirely ignore the ink. Habits are the raw data feed of version B. They don't lie.
Here's where it gets really interesting. To accurately track these habits, Wells introduces the concept of shadow moments.
Yes.
These are the specific moments in your life where there is absolutely zero audience. There is no one around to give you a gold star, no social media followers to validate your goodness, and absolutely no immediate tangible reward for doing the right thing.
Shadow moments are the ultimate integrity test. He writes that the soul's compass isn't found in the public hymns we sing, but in the direction our feet naturally take when the lights go out and no one is watching.
But wait, I have to push back on this again, because we need to ground this in reality.
Sure, go for it.
If a person's entire moral compass is judged purely by what they do in the dark, without any social support or accountability, isn't that an impossibly high standard?
How do you mean?
Well, we're inherently flawed creatures. Everyone stumbles in the dark.
Yeah.
If the standard for having a valid building is flawless behavior in our most stressed, isolated shadow moments, I feel like the whole structure collapses for all of us. Is Wells demanding absolute perfection here?
I see what you're saying. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of human psychology, no, he is not demanding perfection. Perfection is a myth.
Okay.
What he's demanding is consistency of trajectory. Think about how a physical compass actually works. Its only job is to point north. Now imagine you are trying to hike north through a dense, unfamiliar forest in the pitch black.
Sounds terrifying, but okay.
Right. You are absolutely going to trip over a hidden route. You might slip down a muddy embankment. You might even get totally disoriented for a few minutes after a fall.
Right. The stumble is unavoidable.
Exactly. Stumbling in the dark doesn't mean your compass is broken, and it doesn't mean your blueprint is a lie. It just means you are a human being navigating incredibly difficult terrain.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the real issue, the failure of the integrity test, is when you loudly claim to everyone that you are heading north, but the second you think no one is looking, you intentionally put the compass away, turn around, and sprint south because it's an easier path.
Okay. So it is about the default trajectory. It's about how you recalibrate after the stumble.
Precisely. How do we recalibrate? We do it by actively self-auditing. When you trip up in a shadow moment, do you recognize the dissonance between your action and your blueprint and then correct your course? Or do you just redraw the blueprint to justify your new direction?
Wow, redrawing the blueprint. That happens a lot.
It does. The integrity test is whether you try to keep the light on when the room goes dark. It's about the underlying habitual choices you make when all the social pressure to be a good person is completely removed.
That makes profound sense. It's not about never making a mistake. It's about what your default settings are when the audience finally leaves the theater.
Exactly.
Now, to truly grasp the weight of why this matters so much, we need to look at the broader context of the author himself. Because Mark Wells is not a life coach.
Definitely not.
He doesn't write daily devotionals or self-help books. If you look at the other material surrounding this specific post on the Knowledge is King platform, the contrast is staggering.
It really is. The surrounding context elevates this from a piece of personal advice into a fundamental theory of how the world operates.
Exactly. Because this is a guy who spends his time analyzing intensely heavy macro-level geopolitical systems. Like on this very same blog, he's publishing deep dives into his secret 1992 blueprint for global supremacy.
Right.
He writes extensively about the systemic weaponization of the word cult in Western society to control dissenting narratives. He dissects the incredibly dense geopolitical complexities of Islam and Western hegemony.
All massive, sweeping topics.
Yeah, he breaks down how historical milestones like the end of slavery were often driven by capitalistic pivots rather than sudden moral awakenings. This is deep, systemic, historical analysis.
Which, this raises an important question. Why does a macro-political analyst, a thinker, spends his days dissecting massive global shifts and historical indoctrination, suddenly pivot to write a deeply intimate, micro-level piece about individual personal character?
That is the exact paradox that caught my eye. Why does the guy mapping out global supremacy care about what you do in traffic?
He cares because he recognizes the fatal flaw in almost every systemic movement in history. By placing an essay about individual shadow moments right next to essays on geopolitical hegemony, Wells is making a profound argument about causality.
Causality. Okay, how so?
He's arguing that no matter what massive geopolitical forces, corrupt institutions, or historical macro trends we are trying to dismantle or rebuild, the absolute foundational unit of power is still the individual human habit.
So, if we look at one of his topics, say, a massive historical shift driven by a new political ideology, the movement might have a flawless utopian blueprint for justice and equality. But if the individuals leading that movement lack integrity in their own private shadow moments, what happens?
The movement inevitably collapses in on itself. Because you cannot dismantle a corrupt global system or build a more just society using people whose internal operating systems are fundamentally broken.
Right. You can't build a strong house with rotten wood.
Exactly. If the individuals making up a movement are privately driven by ego, malice, or greed in the dark, then any new system they build will carry those exact structural flaws right into the foundation. It will eventually rot from the inside out.
That makes total sense.
Which implies a terrifying reality for anyone trying to change the world. Systemic change and personal integrity are inextricably linked. You cannot fix the world's ruined conduct if you are physically standing in the ruins of your own.
That brings all of these lofty, abstract concepts of global justice and truth right crashing down onto your own kitchen table. It places the burden of history squarely on your daily commute and your private decisions.
It's a lot of responsibility, honestly.
It is. So what does this all mean for us today? Synthesizing all of this, Wells distills the entire philosophy into one blunt, inescapable takeaway. He says, your life is the only sermon people will actually believe.
Because words are cheap. Having holy words but hollow habits makes you nothing more than a traveler holding a beautifully drawn map, but possessing absolutely zero intention of putting your boots in the mud and walking the path. Yeah.
True belief, true philosophy, true alignment, whatever language you want to wrap around it, is ultimately found in the excellence of the heart, not the eloquence of the tongue.
We want to turn this directly over to you now, because Wells ends his piece with two very piercing questions, and we want to leave them with you to chew on today.
Yeah, these are tough ones.
First, take a hard look at the mirror of your daily actions. If someone could only observe your habits, if they never heard a single word you said and never read your bio, what would they assume your foundational beliefs are?
That's a gut punch.
Yeah.
And the second question, when you inevitably find a gap between your words and your actions, do you think that gap is usually caused by intentional hypocrisy, knowing better but choosing poorly? Or is it more often just the genuine struggle of human inconsistency?
Pinpointing the difference in yourself might be the most important audit you ever run.
It really might.
Now, before we wrap up, we want to leave you with one final thought. Something that takes this ancient concept of character and pushes it directly into the reality we are stepping into tomorrow. Yeah, so we have been talking about the difference between version A, the stated beliefs, and version B, the actual behavior. We are rapidly moving into a highly digital landscape driven by artificial intelligence and flawless digital avatars.
Moving so fast.
It is. We now have accessible technology that can instantly generate the perfect ethical apology, articulate the most empathetic corporate value statement, or script the ultimate declaration of moral philosophy. AI can draw the perfect blueprint for us in milliseconds.
Which fundamentally crashes the market value of eloquent words. If perfect statements require zero human effort to produce, the blueprint itself becomes completely devoid of value.
Exactly. If a machine can perfectly mimic our stated beliefs and broadcast them in high definition, then our public declarations will soon carry absolutely zero currency.
Wow.
In that rapidly approaching world, our messy, unscripted physical shadow moments, the actual tangible building of the house, might soon become the absolute only proof we have left of our actual humanity.
That's wow.
Yeah, the gap between what we say and what we do won't just be a measure of our personal hypocrisy anymore. It will be the only way to prove we aren't just an algorithm echoing in the void.
An echo without a voice. That is a wild, incredibly sobering reality to consider. Curating a high-definition identity is easy, and it's only going to get easier. But it's the shadow moments that make you real.
Absolutely.
We want to warmly thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope you take these questions with you into your own shadow moments this week. Keep learning, keep running the audit on those habits, and remember, don't just obsess over drawing the perfect roof. Keep building the actual house.